Hi everyone, this is my first video discussion, so I'm going to try this out. I've never done it before, but I'm excited to at least try it. My Hofstede comparison is going to be on South Korea and Japan, two Asian countries. Um, they have a lot of similarities and yet some differences as well. So I am just going to go through the cultural dimensions and kind of outline what I was able to find through my research. So I'll start with power distance. For power distance for South Korea, it is very much a hierarchy. They are very much about representing respect, and they easily accept this as part of their culture. So it's not something that the citizens are resistant to. It's something that they pretty much expect, and they actually function well in that. In contrast, South Korea, they do not as much function with that same kind of rigid hierarchy, but they do have a hierarchy as well. There are some layers within corporate function that kind of makes it seem like they are a little more rigid than they are. It's just because other cultures, like Western culture, we find that to be rigid. They not so much. It's just the layers within their system, because they don't have this like one person that makes all the decisions. They have layers, like I said, within their systems. Both of them, what I found in power distance was they do both have very distinct social statuses, and they also have a lot of value, like I said, placed on respect and just kind of following some of the rules and social norms they already have set up. South Korea scored a 60 in power distance, and Japan scored a 54 when I used the Hofstede tool. Takes me to individualism. Um, South Korea is more of a collective society. They have a strong sense of community. They have really strong family ties. You take responsibility for the people within your circle. So it's just a lot of kind of group based work within the workplace. And they really believe in a shared destiny within their social groups and familial groups as well. They do see failure through this lens of shame. So that's something that I found interesting. So if they have failures, it's kind of a shameful thing. And so that's not something, of course, that they want. You don't want to bring shame upon your family or your circle. So I found that to be interesting. And then with Japan, they are situationally collective. So they're more individualistic in their society and their culture. Other countries, again, see them as more collective because it's just not, if you're in from a Western country, it's not what you're used to. So that looks very collective and not very individualistic like what we normally would be used to. But they are more situationally collective. So as they need to be, they can collaborate and they can be collective in that respect. But that is not really so much so their culture, I would say. They are very private and reserved, and loyalty is important to them in this society. So people tend to stay at their jobs for a long time. They don't job hop. They tend to stay there and stay with that employer. So loyalty is big to them. And then the interesting thing I found between both of them when I was doing my research is that they both believe very strongly in education, and education being the gateway to social advancement. Also, the gateway to, of course, class advancement. So that's something I found interesting between the two countries. Um, Moving right along to masculinity. So South Korea, they scored a 39, so they're more feminine. And Japan, in contrast, scores 95. They're more of a masculine society. So we'll take a look at what those look like. So in South Korea, they're more of a caring culture, more of, again, taking care of your family, your inner circle, and they don't have hard lines between gender roles. So, like in the home, if there's not things that the woman should do, things a man should do. So this culture is very much everybody pitches in and they get done what needs to be done. They are big on compromise and negotiation. And they are very collaborative. So consensus is really important. So they're very collaborative in that regard. In contrast, Japan, like I said, they scored a 95, which is pretty high. So they're more masculine. And I don't think I said this before, but the top score is 100. So just to kind of give you a range of what the scoring is. So they're pretty high on the masculine scale. One of the things that's very important to Japan is having a prosperous life. So they're very competitive, very driven. Some might say they're workaholics. They definitely are very focused on upward mobility and material success. However, women don't enjoy that ability within that culture. It is still very much a challenge for women to participate corporately in moving up. So that's something that is still, women are still working on. We still have those same issues, not to probably the degree they do, but we have that here in our own country, so it's not something we're unfamiliar with. But I thought that was very interesting because they are so work driven. It was interesting to me that it's still very male dominated corporately. Something I found similarities between the two is that they both countries are really fully committed to working. It's like what they do. They live to work. And they have very strong work ethic. So I thought that was interesting. And not too surprising. I've definitely heard that before about, Asian culture. So wanted to just highlight that. Uncertainty avoidance. South Korea scored 85 and Japan 92. And so they were very closely aligned in this category, in this dimension. Very regimented, very rigid culture. Not only in the workplace, but just day to day. They like and need rules to function. They don't do well without those rules, so they need those rules to function. They are very highly unlikely, rather, I'd say, to think outside the box. That's not their thing. They're very much into risk mitigation. That's huge for both countries. And they are very, in some respects, risk adverse. They don't like to color outside the lines, so to speak. They are very much, regimented, and they do what they do, and that's kind of how it's set up there. that takes us to long term. And for South Korea, they scored 100. So they are a very practical country. They are not into any type of like instant gratification. They aren't into, self gratification. They like things the way it's been in the past. And they have a very generational mindset. They create for generational benefit. So that's something that they're highly focused on, and they do not kind of step outside of that. That's kind of their social norm, and that's where they kind of stay at in terms of long term, looking long term. Japan was not too far off. They were in 88. And again, a practical society. They live by virtues. They're more paternalistic society. They pass things down from father to son and so on and so forth. So again, that generational thing as well. Not quite as rigid as South Korea when it comes to self gratification. So of course they do have things that they do outside of, just, being, I guess, very rigid, but it's still within balance, and they do not go overboard with that. And then the last category I have is indulgence versus restraint. And South Korea scored a 29. Again, they are not a self-indulgent country. They are very much about being fruitful. They want their efforts to be fruitful. They're all about doing something that matters, not doing things that they consider frivolous. They're very disciplined. They follow social norms. They exercise restraint in the things that they do so that they're not wasting time. Japan, very similar. They scored a 42. They don't see value in excess. So they are not, also not overindulgent. They do have that period of, where they will partake in some self-gratification, but still that's balanced. It's not something that they're just out here doing, just whenever they feel, get a feeling like, oh, they want to go do something crazy. They don't really do that. That is not what this, their social norm is. They have leisure time, but again, it's not required. It's not something they feel requirement to do. So they are very disciplined, and they know when to exercise restraint as well. So those are my cultural dimensions comparisons. A lot of interesting contrasts here, but more similarities, I thought, between the two countries. And again, I learned a lot. It's very interesting. One of my articles is one of the expat examples I have. The gentleman that wrote the article, he was from Romania. He moved to South Korea, and he just found their culture very interesting. So he wrote this scholarly article about the country in reference to the cultural dimensions for Hofstede. So that was a very interesting article. So if you have a chance, take a look at that one. And then my other expat example for Japan is a blog I found, and it's called This Japanese Life. I will also, of course, be referencing that in my reference citations. But again, it was interesting. The gentleman that wrote that, he's a high school English teacher living in Japan. So he writes an article, or blog. He blogs, different things about his experience there. So he has, of course, a lot of different experiences being a teacher. The other one, the expat example I have for South Korea, he's actually a student and a writer there. So if you get a chance, check those out. I hope you come back with great questions for me. I hope you learned something from my discussion, and hope you have a great evening. Thank you.